For weeks now, the Arab states have been pushing hard for a complete ceasefire, but neither the US nor Israel has committed to ending the conflict. Netanyahu is now advancing through the south of Gaza and resisting the ceasefire calls. America is also trying to broker a temporary halt for hostages, but that isn't a lasting peace deal either. It's just a reprieve to get people out. The Arab world has lost patience and Saudi Arabia is leading the charge for peace. The foreign minister, Prince Faisal, is now leading a delegation to stop the conflict and he's heading to China. And if I was Joe Biden, I would have fallen off my chair immediately. I would have phoned MBS to really work something out. We are seeing the Saudis go directly to America's biggest economic and geopolitical rival for help. The Arab world no longer sees America as a neutral peace broker or party they can negotiate with. They definitely won't be able to convince Israel, but the United States isn't listening either. And this is a clear sign that the US-led world order is starting to crumble, and China is now being invited by the Middle East to help restore peace. It's a red carpet invitation that goes far beyond this conflict, and it's just a matter of time before we see a big shift in the region. And let's understand the desperate position the Arab world is in. With the US supporting Israel, it's crazy for any country to try any military intervention. Even the Iranians have backed down, at least it seems that way for now. Then you have OPEC unwilling to impose an embargo on Israel. Iran has called for oil supply to be cut away from Tel Aviv, but that didn't fly because of economic reasons. Saudi Arabia has also confirmed they won't weaponize oil to push for a Gaza ceasefire. They don't want to be subjected to any US sanctions or Western oil price cap like what happened to Russia. In other words, the Arab world can't do anything without directly sinking or destroying their economy. There are two carrier strike groups and a US nuclear submarine somewhere in the Arabian Sea, so it's really insane to try anything. But the Arab world has to act, because if Israel continues unimpeded, we have no idea how things will evolve down the road. Diplomats from Saudi Arabia and even Indonesia will be heading to Beijing. China, they have accepted the meeting and is now moving to broker peace once again. According to their foreign ministry, China will have in-depth communication and coordination with the delegation on ways to de-escalate the ongoing Palestinian-Israel conflict, protect civilians, and seek a just settlement of the Palestinian question. So China is now directly involved in the Israel-Gaza conflict. The United States has officially lost control of the situation. Let's understand the position America is taking in this conflict, right? And we don't need to speculate because President Biden has made a public statement. He has written a 2,000-word piece in the Washington Post to justify his actions, and it's titled, "The United States Won't Back Down from the Challenge of Putin and Hamas." And we'll cover Russia another day, but let's just focus on the Middle East for now. This part covers the ceasefire and why the US will continue supporting Israel. Here's why the US has been tracking down the recent UN resolutions. As long as Hamas clings to its ideology of destruction, a ceasefire is not peace. To Hamas members, every ceasefire is time they exploit to rebuild. It's very clear that the US will not pursue a ceasefire until Hamas is eradicated or they surrender. But here's the kicker: Joe Biden is once again promoting American exceptionalism. The United States is the essential nation. We rally allies and partners to stand up to aggressors and make progress towards a brighter, more peaceful future. The world looks to us to solve the problems of our time. Maybe in Biden's mind that is true, but the Arab world is starting to disagree, and that's why they're flying all the way to Beijing to ask China to help solve the Middle East crisis. We are seeing the splitting apart of the unipolar world order. Things are becoming very multipolar today. China has now been requested to play a bigger part in resetting things. And there's another reason for this move. Saudi Arabia is trying to position themselves as the leader of the Arab world. Just recall the recent events. MBS held the Islamic Summit in Riyadh a few weeks ago. They came out with a joint declaration that demanded a ceasefire and aid to enter Gaza. They even called for a cessation of arms exports to Israel. He essentially brought together the entire Arab nations. Many of them didn't like each other, some are still rivals today, but they still came and they worked out on an agreement. And this move to visit China goes beyond helping Gaza. It's a brilliant chess move by MBS to position themselves as the de facto leader in the Middle East and not just OPEC alone. So when the dust settles, we can expect Saudi Arabia to be in an even stronger position tomorrow. he has essentially thrown the United States into a deep quagmire. By going to the Chinese, MBS has essentially relegated the US as a world superpower in the Middle East. It's a huge slap to the face, a diplomatic defeat. If China manages to get a ceasefire, this will be very humiliating for President Biden. It will show the US is not the self proclaimed essential nation. And if China fails to broker a deal, the blame will still be thrown on the shoulders of America because they kept vetoing all the UN ceasefire resolutions. Either way the coin lands, Mohammed bin Salman comes out on top. Saudi Arabia will be strengthened diplomatically. This is horrible for US and Germany in the Middle East. A competing world power is about to enter the fray. China is about to gain a big foothold in the Middle East. The Israel conflict isn't just going to add more to the US national debt, but take away America's standing in the Arab war. But what can China do? They will likely push for a diplomatic resolution through the United Nations. China now has the presidency of the UN Security Council for the month of November. This means China now has a bigger voice on the world stage. They can set the agenda and push new resolution proposals. And guess what? A Gaza ceasefire will be the top priority, as it should be. We can expect the Chinese to keep hammering away at the UN resolutions to get full agreement to halt all the hostilities. I don't think China wants to get into either economic war or direct confrontation with the United States or Israel. It's just not worth it, right? And after the US China summit, Beijing's position has already been strengthened. A big concern is China's oil supply in the Middle East, and it goes way beyond just their imports of Iranian oil. China's dependence on stability in the Middle East is tremendous. Half of China's oil imports and over a third of their oil consumption comes directly from the Persian Gulf. The last thing China wants is a hot war with the US or an expansion of the Gaza conflict. Their economy will be in trouble if the oil stops flowing. We are heading towards a global slowdown, and China can't afford to lose their source of cheap energy. Russian energy might be secure, but if the Middle East erupts, especially if it involves Iran, China's economy will be on fire. We can see China's dependence on oil imports is huge. Of all the major economies, China's consumption versus production is the second highest in the world, just below the Eurozone. They can't afford for things to escalate in the Middle East. So if any military or economic option is off the table, how will China and Saudi Arabia force a ceasefire? Well, it will most likely be a diplomatic show of force to freak out the United States. It's giving the US a soft ultimatum by throwing them a very difficult question. How much influence are you willing to lose in the Middle East? Because the longer you keep this up, China is going to use this as a springboard to slowly edge themselves deeper and deeper in the Middle East. And if China gets a deeper foothold here, which I believe they will, this isn't good economically for America, especially the US dollar. China's special envoy is traveling all over the Middle East and most recently to Turkey, a NATO member. They are making the rounds and putting on a good show for the world while pursuing a ceasefire. Whether you believe this is genuine or not, it really doesn't matter. America has sandwiched itself in a very difficult position where Saudi Arabia and China will come out of this looking like heroes. The Arab world will blame the US if things escalate further as well. And the situation, unfortunately, has gone from bad to worse. Just a few days ago, we said that Iran isn't in full control of their proxies. Unfortunately, we were right again and things have gone off the rails. Iran has seemingly taken a back seat, but now a group linked to them, the Houthis, have taken action, and this threatens to escalate things even further. In a shocking update, Yemen's Houthis have hijacked a cargo vessel off the Red Sea. The Houthis have said a few days ago they'll carry out their threat, and they have indeed delivered. The vessel was bound for India, but the Houthis have commandeered the ship and sailed it back to Yemen. Now Israel is furious about it. They have denied it's an Israeli vessel, and here's what Netanyahu said. Israel strongly condemns the Iranian attack against an international vessel. So the blame is now shifted to Iran, which could escalate tensions even further. America's obviously angry about this as well. The White House has issued a statement. We demand the immediate release of the ship and its crew. We will consult with our UN partners for the appropriate next steps. A hijacking is definitely an awful situation and it should not have happened. But it goes beyond that, right? The US has two aircraft carriers and a nuclear submarine in the region, but yet it has not deterred the Houthis from taking action. Seizure of the ship shows the entire Red Sea and its trade route are now at risk. The conflict has now spread to a vital supply link that concerns the global economy. The seizure happened in the Red Sea, just south of the Suez Canal. The Houthis have demonstrated they could effectively threaten the choke point between Yemen and Djibouti. All the cargoes that go past the canal have to pass through this strait or go around the continent of Africa. You can really see how serious this situation really is. This will disrupt supply chains and cause both an energy crisis and supply side inflation to worsen. And what is the United States going to do? Will Biden send in the US Navy to settle this conflict? If they do it, this could escalate the situation. But if they don't, and they just sit back and wait, their influence and reputation will take a hit. So you can see the big quandary America is facing. They are caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. Either decision could be a trap. Remember the whole premise of US presence in the Middle East is all about securing the region and ensuring oil supply keeps flowing. The Department of Defense is failing in their fourth objective in the Middle East, and that is to deter any state or non-state actors from escalating the crisis beyond Gaza. And that's why this situation is extremely dangerous. What will the United States do in response? Because the Houthis might have crossed the line that demands a response from the US military. It is no wonder the Arab world is frustrated with the situation and they want a ceasefire. We have no idea how fast this conflict could spiral out of control. But let's talk about consequences. The fact that MBS is asking China for help tells us that the future of the Middle East will be multipolar. We'll most definitely see Saudi Arabia, Iran, and the UAE all join BRICS in 2024. There'll be more economic and security partnerships with China. And I want to talk about the US dollar for a bit. Let's remember what underpinned the petrodollar agreement. The Saudis and by extension OPEC agreed to sell oil exclusively in US dollars. In exchange, they will get economic assistance as well as security guarantees from the United States. We know that Saudi Arabia no longer needs economic help from the West. They are a very rich country today. And with all the Gaza conflict chaos spreading, this throws US security into question. Can the US really keep peace in the region? Or are they making the situation worse? And if we need to get help from the Chinese, what's the point of sticking to the petrodollar agreement? The Middle East crisis might be even more consequential than the Ukraine war. If oil starts to get priced away from US dollars, and because of this, the US economy would be in a terrible position. Just a few weeks ago, Beijing completed the first cross-border crude oil trade in digital yuan. It went through China's energy exchange, and I wouldn't be surprised if the counterparty was a Middle East producer. Once the dust settles, we'll continue to see de-dollarization accelerate. We'll also witness Saudi Arabia work closer with BRICS as well. Now, I'm sure smart people in Washington realize how US hegemony is now at risk. The longer a ceasefire eludes in the region, the more influence America will lose amongst the Arab world. And ask yourself this one question. What if one day China gets a military base in Saudi Arabia? That might be unthinkable today, but it is not impossible tomorrow. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Will this force a ceasefire? And how will America respond to this? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.